Hi everyone. My name is Isa Yusuf. In this session, I'm going to walk through walk you through how attackers have been targeting our organization over the last 30 days and what they're doing or what we are doing to stop them. The director of IT has asked me to present our mitigation strategy and um, and this and the scope has grown to include training for our C-suite. So I'm going to keep this focus on business impact while still explaining enough of the technical part. So it will be clear how these attacks actually work. I'll cover three things today. First is how an attacker can gain access to our system based on patterns we've seen recently, how that initial access can turn into privilege escalation and a larger compromise. Um, the third would be the mitigation techniques we can apply without um, upgrading or replacing system using what we already have. I'll start with the first one, how attackers gain initial access. Let's start with how an attacker would get in. First is phishing and credential theft. Attackers send emails that look like they are from HR, IT, or trusted partners. The goal is to trick someone into clicking a link to fake login page or opening a malicious attachment. If the user enters their username and password, the attacker now has a valid credential to our environment. The second part is attacking exposed remote services. They can scan the internet for things like VPN portals, remote desktop gateways, or web admin interface. If those are misconfigured, missing security patches, or protected only by with password, they become an easy entry point. The third part is basically spraying and reuse. Instead of guessing one user's password many times, attackers try a small set of common password across many accounts. They also reuse credentials leaked from other breaches, hoping employees use the same password at work and at home. In a realistic scenario for us, the attackers might look like this. The attack might look like this. The attacker sends a phishing email that imitates an internal IT password reset notification. An employee would click on the link, it lands on a fake login page and then enters the credentials. The initial attack, what would you call it? Attacker immediately uses those credentials or our VPN or SSO portal to successfully gain access into the environment. Um, from foothold to like privilege escalation, once the attacker has first foothold, the first phase is privilege escalation, turning normal access into administrative or system access. Here is how that typically plays out basically. Um, After exploring whatever compromised account they see the attacker checks which application file shares and system the user can access. If the user has more privilege than they really need, the attacker inherits all of that. You know, they actually look for weak spots on the local machine itself and then use that to steal more credentials and then they move laterally. And then one thing they also do is kind of target high value accounts and system. The end goal is often, for domain admin, equivalent directory level control, or maybe executive that have access to like critical business system, data stores, or backup, you know. And so the typical pathway would be phishing, exposed services, stolen user credentials, local privilege escalation, and the whole lateral movement. How do we mitigate this whole process, this whole thing? My mitigation strategy would be stronger authentication controls, enforce multi-factor authentication wherever possible, especially for VPN, remote access, and then administrative logins. Um, Reducing authentication control, what do you call reducing exposed attack surfaces. We'll constant review of our services, if they are reachable from the internet, and then just restrict them to only, what is truly needed. Just put management interface behind the VPN or jump holes rather than just leaving them directly exposed, and using load balancers if you need to, you know. And they use firewalls and access control. Least privilege is always the best way to go. And then, had any emails and web entry points, then, user awareness with real example, and just constant training of the employees. Um, on And then we go into what is the mitigation strategy for just limiting privilege escalation itself, enforces and just enforce least privilege, clean up the privilege accounts constantly, system hardening and then patching, monitoring a lot and responses on its own. In conclusion, the most common attacks we've seen over the last 30 days are not 0 days. They're phishing, weak or reused password, and then exploitation of our exposed services. Once an attack gets in, privilege escalation depends on the access permissions, weak admin password practices, and then, patch system. Um, what we've been doing is, working on hardening our environment, multi-factor authentication just to reduce risk. And then with the C-suite support, this would become part of how we operate on a daily basis. So thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer, any questions that you have. And then thank you for listening to my presentation on how we can mitigate and reduce our attack surfaces. My name is Yusuf. Thank you for watching.